Yes, we are here.
We are.
So everybody, if you see kind of what's going on here, we're doing the third episode of the Yoga Pod podcast, and we have hopefully we've got some people joining us. So if you are joining us at the beginning of this, it would be great if you could go down there and share it with your friends and let them know what's going on. It looks like we've got one
We
eyeball.
have
I see one
one
eyeball.
That's me.
viewer.
Nope, it's Debbie.
Debbie.
You're not Debbie.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
Debbie.
All right.
Yeah, you got to turn your volume down.
I'm gonna share this real quick.
But yeah, if you go and share this, that'd be super helpful. But we're going to start off. We haven't done this before, but we're going to start off this time. Jana is going to give us kind of a little rundown on what is going on at YogaPod Fort Collins right now. So
Yay.
take it away.
All
Jana.
right. So yeah, YogaPod Fort Collins. We are in Midtown. We have a combination of all different kinds of classes. So we have vinyasa, we have heated, non-heated. We have an epic pod hot offering, which is, that set sequence, that nice fiery class. We also just added Ashtanga to the schedule for those of you that are familiar with that practice. We have a teacher training coming up, 200-hour teacher training, Registered Yoga Alliance certified, begins September 12th. And just some all-around awesomeness happening all the time. Lovely members like these two. And we'd love to have you in. We have over 80 classes a week. Right now, at least through October, we're still running our 30 days for $30 special. So come on in, give it a try. That's my plug. How was it?
Nice.
Good.
All right.
You did a great job.
Yay.
Yeah, nice work. I have a couple questions for you about those.
Okay.
How is the sign up looking so far for the teacher training?
It's great. So this is our second teacher training. As you may or may not know, our 1-year anniversary is September 16th, which is awesome. So this is our fall training right now. We have a couple spots remaining, but sign up is good. Enrollment is good. I think it's going to be a really neat group. So
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity to sign up for that. This is not it.
So next week, Amanda, next week, we have a pod hot training happening in January.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So you all might be interested in that one as well.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
A little more dialed down, a little more like focused.
Local. Yeah.
Yeah. So they go, and I'm assuming with that, they'd go through kind of those traditional postures and work on that, and then what kind of the dialogue might be with a pod hot class.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you would learn the sequence that we teach at the studio. You would learn how to cue it. And then it does go into anatomy and philosophy and some other things. So you get a nice overview of teaching itself, but yeah, really focused on that pod hot class for all you hotties.
Yeah. Is it 60 hours?
It's a 60-hour. Yep. So it's 3 weeks, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. Really quick. Mm-hmm.
You make that sound like it's no big deal.
It's no big deal.
Because I have
Yeah.
I have 60 extra hours.
It's just a full
in my
commitment.
life.
And Kyle Larson, who was on episode 2 of this podcast, will be the lead for the hot training.
Sold.
Sold. He's
Sold.
He's a badass. Yes.
Yeah.
How
He's
long
great.
are the classes? Every day?
It's Wednesday evenings, about 7 to 10:30, and this is the same format for the 200-hour. And then Saturday and Sunday are full days, about 8 to 5, and then 10 to 5.
And it's 3 weeks.
3 weeks
Okay.
for the hot and 8 weeks for the 200-hour. And Kyle is also on the 200-hour, as well as Julia Tompkins and Gretchen Combs.
That's like the
The
super
heavy
power.
hitters.
That's
Dream
like
team.
the A
Yeah.
team
Dream
right there,
team.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
we're
fun.
really excited.
That's gonna be fun. So Amanda, we have Amanda
Hi.
here.
Woo!
And I know Jana, you're the one who made up kind of the guest list because you know your members very well, and I know you had there was a reason behind having
Mhm.
Amanda on.
Yes.
So why don't you?
Well, okay. So Amanda is one of our members. She's amazing. We've now been practicing with her for about a year. And it's neat at YogaPod. We like to sit with our community. We like to talk. And Amanda told me some really interesting things about her life and her upbringing that I was like, "Ooh, podcast guest." And so not to divulge too much, but she's an amazing person, hilarious, a mom. She's lead singer in a band, and we're gonna probably hear about a lot of that today. So she's awesome.
It's a lot to live up to.
You'll be fine.
Should we start with kind of where did you start
Yeah.
your yoga? Because you didn't know each other before the
No.
studio, is that right?
No.
So less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it's been so much long. I'm sure it seems like it's been an eternity for you.
Yes.
But it seems like it's been so much longer because there have been so many kind of relationships that have been built there and everything. But how did you get involved in yoga?
Well, it was so funny when you first asked me to be a guest and you asked me to write a bio and send it. I sat down and I started writing. And then before I knew it, like 2 hours had gone by and it was like 2,500 words. And I'm like, okay, this is absolutely ridiculous. I really tried to dig deep and figure out like when did it start? I really honestly can't remember exactly when it started. But when I was 27, so about, I'm gonna age myself, I guess, gonna go for it. 5 years ago, I was at the tail.
Yeah, wow.
Ooh.
I got over a decade on you. Okay.
I was basically at the tail end of finishing up a career in dentistry. I was in dentistry for almost 10 years as an office manager, and then I also was an assistant. And anybody who's ever been to the dentist or worked in that field knows that we are not necessarily in the most ergonomic positions. And
that is not where I thought you were going to go with that, but okay.
Yeah. And I actually genuinely really still have a passion for teeth and dentistry. I know that sounds dorky, but
all right.
So essentially what happened is I started to develop chronic pain in my right shoulder. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm only 27 and I am in constant pain. I was constantly taking ibuprofen. I was getting chiropractic adjustments a few times a week. I was getting ice massages once or twice a month where the massage therapist would go in and essentially numb that spot and like essentially try to break up this knot that was in my back.
That sounds terrible.
And it was terrible. And I'm like, this obviously wasn't sustainable. And I either have to, so I had to essentially quit dentistry. And that was when I kind of decided to start diving into practice a little bit. And that was mostly because a friend of mine mentioned that there was a kid yoga. And at the time, my son was younger and I thought it'd be good for him. And I started to kind of pop into classes here and there. And this was at Bell Yoga, which was under Cafe Vino. And I did that for a few months. And then sadly, the owner got diagnosed with cancer. And about 6 months later, she passed away.
Wow.
So that kind of halted my practice for a little bit. I did a little bit of home practice, but throughout that home practice, almost immediately, I'd say within less than 2 months, my pain went away.
Wow.
In my back. And I was like, holy cow, this is so crazy and magical. Even though I'd been doing what I thought was all the right things for a really long time.
Sure. So not just lessened, but gone.
Yeah. I mean, to this day, it was, I think about it and I'm like, I still can't believe how powerful it was
Sure.
to my body, even though I was doing all the right things. So it was crazy.
Wow. So what type of yoga were you practicing when you started getting into the practice?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I'm pretty sure it was probably a
Isn't that funny?
Form of
It's a version of
when you first get started, you're like, I don't know, yoga's yoga.
Right.
And I
Right.
certainly wasn't
Totally.
raised doing yoga. And I was like a runner. And so it probably was an easy or maybe like what we call our Pod Flow 1 at Yoga Pod. But then after a few years, I kind of started, I had a mountain biking injury about a year and a half ago, August of 2017. And that's when I kind of decided to start taking it easy. I was like, you know what? I do not need to go essentially almost down cliffs on a mountain bike and over my handlebars and
Mhm.
almost die.
Sure.
Like, I don't need to be doing that to my body as much. I still like a good ride every once in a while.
Sure.
And I had this horrible injury, and I was just like, I need to just stop. I need to take a break. I couldn't be on a bike seat for a while. And so I decided to go to Elan.
Yep.
And about 4 months into going to Elan, basically on a daily basis, they're like, and we're closing. I'm like, what is happening right now?
What?
But I'll never forget. I never knew the difference between different types of yoga. You know, yin, vinyasa, any of those. And I accidentally went to Kyle's Pod Hot, or no, not
Oh.
Pod Hot, but his hot class at Elan, and I had never had my ass kicked
Totally.
so
Totally.
hard in my whole life, but then like liked it too.
Yeah, it's
I was
weird,
like,
right?
why does this feel so, it hurts so good, you know? And then I was hooked. And so I would say last year, between Elan and then switching
Yep.
to Yoga Pod, I had probably over 330 days of yoga last year alone.
Whoa.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was crazy because it became an addiction essentially.
Sure. Well, and it substitutes or takes place of a workout, you know. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that's kind of what happened for me as well. I couldn't run anymore. And I was like, I've got to do something. Like, I can't
Mhm.
I'm not the kind of guy to just sit around.
Right.
And so it's that same thing. I'm wondering if we should maybe change the name of this
I
to
know.
the Hot Yoga Podcast.
Well,
as
it's-
it's so far, but I'm sure we're gonna
It's-
have a lot of guests.
we
on
will.
there.
We'll
Yeah.
have a lot of people that'll come in, but it has been interesting how this hot theme keeps recurring.
Yeah.
And it's because there's so much power in the practice. And Brad Hoback, who I feel like we all we also mention on every podcast, but you know, at Yoga Pod, like we're really blessed to be surrounded by
Amazing.
so many amazing yogis and mentors and people that we can learn from.
Mhm.
Sure.
And Brad gifted my Lisa and I this book for our birthdays, and it's Richard Freeman, who he is really big into Ashtanga, another type of yoga, which you tried accidentally
I did.
the other day.
I mean, it was somewhat intentional. I had no idea that it was like the first class of the first time of the whatever, and I was like,
Yeah,
wow, this is
you've got your work cut out.
yeah, I
for
didn't
you.
know. Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah.
what I was getting into, but it was good.
I
was glad.
actually accidentally tried Brad's Ashtanga at
Oh.
Elan, and I was like, "What is happening
I know.
Yeah.
right now?" It's definitely a way to take, and I've been kind of procrastinating taking my practice to that next level.
Yeah.
But I know it's definitely the next step.
It's on the horizon.
Yeah.
Which all yoga, we have these seasons, right? Where you lower, like with any activity, like you take it easy and then you're ready to dive back in. And
Sure,
Ashtanga is so different from hot. And so when you
but it's not. I mean, it is,
yeah,
but it
it's-
isn't.
It's
Yeah.
regimented.
Yeah.
It's very like strict kind of, but the movements are so different
Oh,
that
for sure.
you realize how much opportunity for growth you have.
Yeah.
And that book that Brad gave us, he was saying, Richard Freeman says, it doesn't matter the lineage of yoga that you're practicing as long as it takes you deep, like below the surface.
Yeah.
Then that's the practice you should be in. And so for a lot of people, that's hot. For a lot of people, that's Ashtanga. For me, for many, many years of my practice, it was hot vinyasa all the way every day. But yeah, we keep coming back around to that pod hot.
It is interesting how that happens.
Well, it's a super powerful practice, which, you know, that's where I saw you always at YogaPod, and you too. And when I start seeing you guys kind of dabble in these other offerings, I get excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that your jam, Amanda? Is hot your jam now?
Well, it definitely was my first obsession. Once I got in a hot studio, I was like, I'm never not going to be in a hot studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do like, I love hot vinyasa. I also remember the very first time I took Gretchen's hot vinyasa at
Mm.
Elan, And that also rocked my world too, because I had never in my whole life had, honestly, I'm gonna fangirl out right now, but like Gretchen is such a remarkable vinyasa teacher, and
Yeah.
we're as a community really, really lucky to have her.
Yes.
Agreed.
Oh man, she's amazing. And the way that Gretchen came about was just so awesome. And you never think about how everything kind of converges and it's all kind of set up for you before you even have a plan. But Gretchen, I took her class as well at another studio in town and fell in love with her. Like, I call her my spirit yogi. And she's magical. And so she's another one that it was like when we're looking at opening the studio, it's like, we've got to have Gretchen.
Yeah.
She's amazing. So you can fangirl out on her all you want.
Yeah. So I essentially was just following. I knew I needed a hot studio, and I knew I needed Gretchen and Kyle.
Wherever you're going, I am
Yeah.
going. I swear, this is not a cult, though.
That's what people in cults say. It's a family.
Yeah, yeah,
Also, what people in cults say.
for sure.
Oh man. So you mentioned you didn't do yoga growing up. So if you're comfortable, tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, I was
Nobody's watching. I mean, no, this isn't going anywhere, so don't
You know?
worry. Nobody will know about it. It'll just
Um,
get buried. No, whatever you're comfortable talking
Yeah.
to the world.
Or uncomfortable,
Well, I was raised in a very rural, kind of religious conservative part of this country in north central Montana. I actually went to a one-room schoolhouse until I was
Wow.
in 7th grade. I legitimately would ride my horse to school. And so, along with some of that upbringing comes just a certain type of fixed mindset, probably.
yeah.
And I, I will say that maybe a lot of my potential openness to be able to maybe even explore a little bit of different stuff was my mom probably was a little on the eccentric side. She's probably going to watch this someday, but be like, oh, I'm eccentric. And she actually, I remember being like kind of embarrassed because she would like do Tai Chi. And she'd do these like Tai Chi videos.
Would you do it in
and
the
I'd
park?
Be like, what are you doing? Like,
That's so
we're
great.
like, we're gonna go hunting, like
Yeah.
fishing. And my mom's like Tai Chi. And so it was really interesting just to see her. And it's really funny is because I actually had forgotten about that until you had asked me to kind of write a little bio, and this is the long version of the bio that I had written about everything. And I'm like, wow, I forgot that my mom was maybe a little bit more on the eccentric side of things, and she would just kind of do things that nobody else really did. And she was definitely maybe a little bit more hippie than cowboy. So
Mhm.
yeah, and it wasn't, honestly, I didn't get into yoga or this I don't know, anything Eastern related until I moved to Colorado and
That'll do it.
expanded a few horizons there.
That'll
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, lots of like-minded individuals here
Yeah.
in Colorado.
And if you're not, we'll change you. No, I think that's one of the things that can be attractive about here. But sometimes when you come somewhere or you go somewhere like this, you get involved in things that you would have never considered. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of the way, because myself, I mean, I work in the motorcycle industry, like
Yeah.
about as it might as well be cowboys, right?
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, it's very kind of macho and
Yeah.
not, people don't talk about health a whole lot.
Mhm.
There's a lot of turkey legs and Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Mhm.
And so that you know, that transition to like, okay, I'm not running anymore. I'm not, you know, like doing triathlons or whatever, but I'm going to go to a class and like do something typically with a bunch of women, and do a bunch of movements that are pretty
Yeah.
uncomfortable
Mhm.
was really uncomfortable at first. Like I did not feel home. I didn't like go to yoga and was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole life.
You're like, these are my girls. I just like hanging out with my girls,
Yeah,
doing some
exactly.
yoga.
Yeah, not so much.
Well, I think that's amazing too. Like I love seeing whenever I walk into a class, a almost equal ratio, and sometimes that
Mhm.
does happen,
Mhm.
and it's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have a really nice male demographic at the studio. And it's something that we're also really passionate about. I mean, I would love to see more men in the practice. We definitely see a lot more men in the pod hot. I think, and Ken, you're the man in the situation, not me, but if that wasn't obvious to everybody. But I do think it's that like that extreme, that push that you're looking for, where you
Mhm.
feel like you can walk in, you can just completely let go, sweat it out. You know, you've worked really hard, and then you can leave with that satisfaction. And I know women enjoy that too, but yeah, we're trying. I mean, we would love to see more men in the studio. It's yoga's not for women. I think that's a
Agreed.
huge misconception.
Agreed.
Not just for women,
Yeah.
I should say.
You know, and going back to kind of what we were talking about before is like I've seen a huge, almost gradual shift in even people in more rural areas being more conscious about health. Like it's finally
Oh, yeah.
getting popular.
Hmm.
It's cool to be healthy
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Cooler. Yeah.
Cooler, yeah, to eat organic and get all Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some places. I was just in Wisconsin, and there's a place in Wisconsin. I think it's called Viroqua, Wisconsin,
Oh.
and it is like very progressive, very like there's a yeah, it's a really cool place, and a lot of very progressive people live there, and you know, farm asparagus and stuff. You know, so yeah, I
Wow.
agree with you. I mean, and to your point, I was just in La Crosse, Wisconsin, with a bunch of other moto journalists riding motorcycles, and like I got done riding, and we rode through the rain all day, and I went to a hot class, and somebody was like, we were at our dinner that night or something. Some guy was like, you know, where'd you go? And I was like, oh, I just went to a yoga class. He's like, really? And I was like, well, it was a hot class. He's like, how far was it? And I was like, oh, it was only like a mile and a half. It's like a $5 Uber ride. And he's like, I just started hot.
No,
And we
nice.
had this whole conversation
Wow.
about yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally not what I expected.
That's awesome.
You know, so
Well, anytime we can talk about yoga, I'm in.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, the best thing that can happen, like you were saying, now it's cool and it's trendy to be healthy and like, you know, eat well and all of that juice. The best thing that can happen for us as a society, as the world, and my lease loves when I use the word society, so that's for you, is for yoga to become cool and popular and like trendy, because it doesn't really matter how you come to your mat. You'll find your way beyond the physicality of the practice at some point, you know. And I think you came to yoga, Ken, for an injury. You came for pain. I came to yoga for an injury. But, you know, it's like, why do we all stay? Like, why do you, Amanda,
Yeah.
why do you stay with the practice?
Well, that's a great question because I did take the summer off
Mm-hmm.
and
You were missed.
I missed.
how
I
did it work
missed
out?
It was good. Well, I mean, I was in the mountains. I think I counted. I was up in the mountains 42 days this summer, and it
Wow.
was kind of
Lucky.
it was
Mhm.
it was good. I felt like maybe I was using yoga as a replacement for something
Yep.
instead of doing it for its true purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like I have an addictive personality, and you know, I went all in yoga like right away, balls to the wall.
Mhm.
And I found that they almost might have become a little bit obsessive.
Mm-hmm.
And so this summer was really nice. I still practice a little bit here and there, but I took a lot of it off and just spent a lot of time in nature and hiking with my dog and my son and hanging out with my husband. And now I actually just came back today because now school's back in session. I'm down here full time, pretty much full time, and it's time for me to get back into a routine. I love, and I guess maybe that is why I keep coming back to yoga. Is like I did need a little bit of a break, but what yoga gives me on a daily basis is it sets up this routine,
Mm-hmm.
and my personality, I definitely need routine because I'm very easily distracted. But also, strictly from the physical perspective, is I have never been more well-rounded as an athlete than when I'm pretty heavy into a yoga practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've kind of started easing my way back on a bike, and you would think that it would take time and I'd be out of shape, and I'm like crushing it. I'm like, how did I do that? I've not rode in a year, and my Strava times are on point. So
It's amazing. I can remember doing CrossFit like 5 days a week, and having the injury, which brought me to the practice of yoga, and then deciding after I was healed to return to CrossFit and actually try to like recruit the proper muscles to do these lifts as
Sure.
opposed to lifting improperly causing injury. And everybody was like, you'll just have to start back at level 1 and just build that base back up. And I was so impressed after so much time off going back, how strong I felt and how much, physical strength I had maintained just through a yoga practice. So yeah, I mean, it keeps you in great shape. The reason I stay with the practice now is, and I see what you're saying about a routine. Like, I don't have one now just because I take a class when I can take a class. But it does help me with a little bit of like it sets me up mentally for a successful day, which to me is like, I made it through my day without yelling at my kids, or I made it through my day without getting ticked off in traffic, or I didn't overeat or obsess over something. And so for me, it's like those mental habits that are presented all day long. Yoga helps me kind of quiet those down.
yeah,
Sure.
a lot of times when you're in a hot class and you're maybe towards the end of the standing portion of it, you're like so tired, and you feel like you could almost pass out. And I heard Kyle once say that if you aren't shaking to the point where you feel like you can't stand anymore by the end of the standing portion of the hot series, then you're basically not doing it right.
That sounds like Kyle.
And so what that has like, and that type of mentality is like, for me, crossed over and translated to is, if I can get through this,
Yeah,
like I can get through anything.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah.
And whether that's a huge climb, on the mountain bike, or whether that's a really difficult project, or at home, or whether that's in a relationship where you're having to figure things out, and it might be uncomfortable. It actually usually is uncomfortable.
it is.
Yeah. Well, and there's a piece of that too, where when you're in that class and you go through that, like, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I want to say hell.
I'm like waiting. What are we going to hear?
But when you come out the other side of it, you're different, right?
Mhm.
And that's the thing that I don't always necessarily come out of a class and go, oh, I feel better. Like I think that might be a little bit of a misnomer, because there are times when I come out of there and I don't feel better, whatever that means, but I feel different. Like I always come out of there with a different attitude than when I walked in. And that seems to be really helpful. And I agree, at least for me, having that routine, I can't always have a routine because I'm on the road at times. But when I have that routine, and I can build in, 5 or so days of yoga slash pod fit slash whatever, a week, it's like it's better for the world. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, that's what we tell people. We run into objections all the time. Being in the business of yoga is something that's so interesting for me. I mean, for 5 years, I was a committed student, 5 times a week, solid home practice. I would even practice at home in the morning and take a class at lunch. And when we went through our teacher training, they told us, you be prepared to not be a student anymore. Now you're a teacher. And that scared me a little bit because I
Sure.
wasn't ready to like let go of that, that student experience. And that never happened for me. I've always remained a student. I'm always in class for me, like that's my time. I'm not critiquing the teacher unless, I'm there to offer them feedback. And when I'm teaching, I'm in there for the students. It's such an honor to be guiding the students. And I experienced all of that prior to opening up the studio, and being on the business side of this, what's become such an industry is so fascinating. And we have people that come in and, they need to cancel their membership, or they have objections to signing up or coming in, and it's always the same. I don't have time. I'm too busy. I'm maxed out. I'm needed here and there. And we tell them all the time, yoga is going to allow you to show up for all of those things and those people in your life as a better person
Sure.
than if you aren't practicing. And so, yes, the world is a better place if we're all doing yoga,
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
Well, there's a kind of a famous story about Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, the founder of the Lutheran faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going religious, I promise. But they talked to him about how he still has, whether he still had time to pray. And he said, well, without the amount of prayer that I do, there's no way that I could do everything else that I do. And it's that same sort of
Yeah.
philosophy that I see, because it's about priorities,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, the second you stop doing the things that anchor you throughout
Mhm.
the day is when you get burnout.
Mm-hmm.
You start to spiral
Mm-hmm.
in many different ways.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Oh yeah. But the thing I think that's interesting about that too is that I think there's a perception in it, or I have a perception of people who, like, it was so refreshing to have Kyle in here,
Mm-hmm.
and the last one, because you talk to people and you go, oh, they're just people, right? Like nobody is, everybody's flawed. Everybody has, dark times.
Mhm.
Everybody spirals. Everybody does, like,
Totally.
but I think there's at times an expectation or even a perception, that somehow, if you go and do enough of this, like, you're going to be immune.
Mm.
And that has not been my experience. That's like the ups and downs, the vicissitudes of life, it's just life, and but having a practice, having some sort of routine, at least gives me that anchor of like, okay, there's this one thing
Mm-hmm.
that I know I can go to, and I'm going to come out changed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and it's very easy to make excuses to not have those anchors.
Yeah.
And
It is.
I fell into that a little bit, even just, over the summer. I was really good about meditating and journaling and, reading a positive book every day. And I just kind of slowly started to drop
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. And I just woke up one day and I was like, why do I feel like shit?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I don't feel happy right now. What is wrong with me? And I remember, God, it's so sad. I remember one time having this conversation with somebody on the Book of Faces, and they were basically saying that you aren't a good parent unless you give all of yourself to just your parent, just your significant other and your children. And I was like,
Not me.
I disagree.
Yeah.
I think that is basically why people end up murdering their whole families.
It's a little
I
extreme.
mean, it might
It's a
be-
little extreme, but
No,
I get where
but,
you're
like-
going with it.
like, I mean, yeah, I'm like, no, if you lose yourself
Mhm.
in serving others constantly and you
Yeah.
are not serving yourself, you might drive off a cliff.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you snapped and you lost it. And like, if especially too, like your people in your life don't love you because of what you do for them.
No.
They love you and they look up to you and respect you because of who you are and the interesting things about you. You know, you're a great writer, and I like that you still nurture that passion. You know, you and your motorcycles. You know, like I don't know, but like
Yeah.
It's what makes you you.
Yeah.
Part of who you are.
and to model that for your partner or your children, to be like, no, you are supposed to live this life for yourself and it's not
Mhm.
supposed to be for other people, but people can come into it and you get to share that with them.
Mhm.
Sure.
That's what it's all about.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
All right, done. Mic drop.
mic drop. No, it's so true. And it's funny what you were just saying, Ken, is I was just kind of in this experience in my life where just last week where I was able to, for the first time, because of my yoga practice, step outside of a tense situation and see it more as like an observer and be able to see that person for who they are, like
Yeah.
their pain, their hurt, like what they're
Sure.
going through, and see them as another human and know like I've experienced that too, and be able to offer them compassion
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to feeling attacked or upset or taking
Combative.
combative and taking it personal. And it felt like such a goal. It felt like I'd reached such a goal in my life to be able to disengage from a tough situation and see it differently. And it's because of yoga. It's because of, you know, when I step on my mat, that's practice for life. And it's like you were
Mhm.
saying, if you're uncomfortable on your mat, and you can get through that, then you can get through these uncomfortable situations in your day-to-day life and come out evolved and a better person because of it.
Yeah. Something that you touched on earlier, Amanda, was, you know, that feeling of like waking up and being like, what happened? And I feel like those, it's so much easier to continue with something
Yeah.
than it is to start again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's so one of the things that I've, you know, and unfortunately it took me a lot of years to figure it out.
That's so
But
profound.
it's like that up and down,
Yeah.
you know, of like, I don't like that. Like I like the kind of the smooth sailing, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
so to speak. And so that, and I think that's part of what yoga provides, right? It
Mhm.
provides, and I think it's also a huge portion of what hot provides, right?
Mhm.
Because you have that like consistency of like, you know, somewhat, you know, more or less what
Yeah.
you're getting into.
Right.
And so that, like, it's like you said before, it's like that anchor, you know. And then just speaking to what you were talking about in terms of compassion, you know, those are the things that because I got to a point in my practice where I was thinking about a lot of other things other than what was going on right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't becoming counterproductive, but it wasn't as productive as I wanted it to be. And it wasn't even remotely like, oh, I've mastered this. It was just like, oh, I know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
I can mail this one in. I can do, well, you know, whatever it was. And so I found, and we've talked about this before, like those centering practices while I'm on my mat. So when my mind kind of starts going somewhere else, I can go back to these kind of mantras or sayings, you know, some that have to do with compassion or, you know, being joyful, or the things that are really hard for me as a human or whatever to manifest in my life, you know, or they're just not my natural tendency. And so, you know, that piece of how yoga has, improved my life, and I would assume the people around me as well, is really profound,
Mhm.
So anyway.
Yeah, there's so much power in the practice. And we say that all the time, but it's because we freaking mean it. Like, and, my Lisa and I, when we were grinding, like, to get this studio open, there was a solid, I want to say at least 3 to 4 months, all last summer that we didn't get to practice at
Yeah.
all. And it was so ridiculous because we knew that's what we needed. But at that point, it was like, that was our yoga. Like, opening the
Mhm.
studio
Sure.
was our yoga. That was our seva. That was our service to everybody else.
Sure.
And we knew it would pay us back infinitely, right? So it's that investment on the front end, completely worth it. But, at one point, like, we're officing out of the mall. It's so ridiculous. We're dealing with so many things all day long, and my Lisa's back is out and my neck is out, and we're like hobbling around trying to, get the studio open. And we just, when the studio opened, we committed 100% to taking class from day one. Like, we took the very first class at Yoga Pod. Gretchen taught it. It was a pod hot,
Nice.
a 75-minute on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. What a time to open your doors.
Yeah.
And we took it that very first class. And my Lisa and I, we make time every single week. Like, you take a class, I take a class. She'll text me at 6 a.m. You're taking this class today. And I'm like, fine, if you're taking this class. And it's because we know, like, if we aren't on our mats, we're not going to be successful running a yoga studio.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's super powerful.
For sure. Well, and I would imagine there's a part of, like, if you obviously spend a lot of time on a bicycle, or you have, there's a part of that too that's similar to yoga. Don't you think? Like, in that, like, like, you can get into that kind of meditative state of, you're seeing everything that's coming at you, right? But you're also in, like, a different sort of, it's not like just riding on the road.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, you've got everything. There's climbs in everything, not just, there's the climb in the yoga class when you're the end of your hot series,
Sure.
a climb at the end of the, when you're riding dams. Like, there's climbs in everything.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and so important to remember that yoga is not just the physical practice on your mat, the asana. Like, mountain biking can be very meditative. Fly fishing, like anything that pulls you deeper into who you are as a person, that's your yoga for sure.
Yeah, I did a lot of hiking this summer, and I made a point. I was like, no, I wasn't listening to a podcast. I wasn't listening to music. I genuinely just was like, gosh, I think I just need to be, like, quiet and alone. But I definitely always take my dog, because if you have a dog and you go hiking without your dog, you don't have a soul.
Sorry, you're staying home. I'm gonna go.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
I mean,
but yeah, I
hear you.
animals. I mean, they're amazing.
Animals are amazing.
But yeah, I definitely had a chance, and it felt so good, because, like, I walked into the studio this morning, and I walked into the studio this morning, and then I just, like, it's like, God, I totally missed this. And I rolled out my mat, and I was like, this is exactly what I'm here to do right now.
Yeah.
And it was so nice. It felt like I was coming back to, I'm coming back to a practice that I purposely took a break from, just for a little bit, because I felt like I needed to. And now I feel like I get to see it in a different way and approach it from a place of a different type of growth now.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, because you've been off the mat for so long practicing those other forms of yoga. It's the same, I think, probably for anybody. Ken, you have to take breaks all the time.
Yeah, I try not to, but yeah, I do. And it's, I'm in Sturgis for a week or whatever, and there's no, I guess I could go to Rapid City and do yoga, but I was literally, like, practicing in my room, because I was just like, I have to do this, especially it's so sitting in one spot, for hours, or
Right.
standing or walking or doing all those things, I think can be really demanding, at least for me physically. And so having that opportunity to maybe give a little more love and attention to, specifically
Yeah.
my back,
Mhm.
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
essential.
Well, I have a really good friend who's a touring musician, and he's on the road. I mean, sometimes it's almost just most of the month. And he started to incorporate just kind of, even he'd be in a big group of people and would excuse himself for even just like 20 minutes or half an hour and just go do a quick little yoga practice, or
Yeah.
even just sit and just be for a little bit. It's so
Mhm.
easy to get caught up in being busy,
Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
and we get addicted to being busy.
Oh yeah.
And when we're not taking that time for ourselves, we're not showing up as the best version of
Right.
ourselves for anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, you brought up music. So I know you are a musician, correct?
I dabble. I mean,
You dabble.
Stop. She's amazing.
So are you in a band?
yeah, I'm in a few different bands.
Okay.
I have I call it my main project band. It's called Colony Funk, and it's kind of a funk soul blues revival R&B band. And then I have this I call it my side project band. uh, I'm in a band with Michael Kirkpatrick, and we call it the Honey Rider Band. So, and that's actually who I was talking about, who's on the road a lot and takes time for himself to get
Mhm.
away and just meditate. And I'm in the band, both of these bands, with my husband. So it's
A family affair.
yeah, and so we do a lot of music, and because my husband owns a recording studio in town, and so there's a lot of music in our life.
Excellent. How'd you get started in music?
Well, so when I was young, I must have been even like uh, under 10. We would go to church, this little country church, every Sunday and sing pretty much the same hymns. I mean, there was every once in a while we get a wild and crazy one in there, but and so I was doing a lot of singing. And at one point, I don't know if it was my grandpa or my grandma or my mom or my dad, somebody said, basically, it was like, she's good at singing. She should do that more. And uh, there was a woman, we grew up 60 miles from the nearest town, and our county was like 2,000 people.
Wow.
So there really wasn't a whole lot in the way of, you know, as far as like getting like vocal lessons. That is a huge commitment to have to drive to town all the
Mhm.
time to do that. So there was a woman that grew up in the Sweetgrass Hills where I grew up, and I went and saw her once a week. And for about, I mean, maybe like 10-ish years. And then when I finally went to public school, I kind of started doing choir and all that stuff. And then I moved to Colorado, and I had a child very young and quit singing completely for about, I would say, 8 years. And then I had an opportunity to kind of get back into it a little bit, and slowly but surely have just kind of gotten a little bit more into it. I wanted to quit, but my husband was like, you should probably keep singing. He's like, I don't want to give you a big head, but
You're
you're pretty good.
I mean, you're all right.
So, but yeah, so it's, it's I never want it to be something that is, I don't, I think it's important to not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I was in a band where maybe it was being taken a little bit too seriously, and I just think it should be fun. Like, and I don't see, it's Fort Collins. Like, it's not like we're gonna
You're not in LA?
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna like, so yeah.
So you guys were just back in the studio recording?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. So my favorite part about music, even more than performing, is I love creating.
Mhm.
I love writing. I love working with my band and writing a new song together. And it's one thing when you take it from the beginning stage to performing it for people, but then when you get to go into the studio and lay it down
Sure.
for the whole world.
Yeah.
kind of like we're doing now.
Yeah. For the whole world, all four
Yeah.
people. Yes.
It's very it's productive. It
Yeah.
honestly just genuinely feels really productive, and you're just like, cool, did that, on to the next one. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, how do you feel like your yoga and your music goes together?
Well, I will say, the music industry is, definitely known for getting a little rowdy. I know, later
No.
nights.
No.
There have been times where I haven't gone on stage until midnight, and along with that comes libations, and you got to stay up. I was a smoker for many years, and then I went from being a smoker to, and I can actually say this out loud because I just told my teenage son for the very first time, so now the world can know, because I didn't want him to find out like through the grapevine. He was so upset, and I was like, yeah, totally, I'm human though, so sorry. And so I was a smoker, and then I went from being a smoker to a closet smoker to a social smoker, but still a smoker.
Mhm.
And it's disgusting. Like, there's no doubt about it. I was definitely still a smoker up until when I say addiction, I've like literally, I think, replaced my social smoking habit with yoga.
Mm.
And so, I think it's like been a year and a half since I've even touched anything tobacco related. And like, it wasn't even hard. I just all of a sudden one day was like, I'm done, and I don't really care to do this anymore.
Wow.
And I think I know it was like I replaced it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so now you have to go back and find that like healthy version of your yoga practice that isn't fueling some other addiction, which I mean, that's such a debate, right? Like, what's better?
Right. Oh, of
Obviously,
course.
like, if
But addiction's addiction. I mean, you can
Right.
be
Yeah.
doing it for the wrong reasons, or
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's why, like, I definitely know that it's served me for so long in the best possible way. And finding a healthy balance of everything
Mhm.
is a struggle, but it's totally, I don't think you ever find that. I don't,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. No.
You're
I mean,
always
I
working
haven't.
at it.
Yeah. It seems like I don't know anybody that has said they've reached it yet. That balance is like,
Yeah.
it's a constant.
Yeah.
Show me
It's work.
Show me someone who says that they have it, and I'll show you probably a liar.
Yeah. Probably.
It's true. And I think it's also, people think that yogis don't know how to have fun, or that we're all just kind of sitting around holding hands and like meditating, and like we all have our shit. We all like
Sure.
to have a good time. I mean, I love to have a good time. Don't get me wrong. So, it's interesting. One of the main reasons why we're doing this podcast is because people are so different. It doesn't matter if you're a yogi, or if you practice yoga 5 times a week, or if you do hot, or this or that,
Or if you've never done
or
yoga.
if you've never done yoga.
Like, maybe we're just trying to convince one person out
right,
there
right.
that, like, hey, try it out,
Yeah,
see what happens, and get back to us. Let us know how it turned out for you.
yeah. Come as you are. Like,
Yep.
bring all your stuff,
Sure.
bring all your baggage, and spend some time on your mat and kind of see what happens with it. And it does lead you to some life-changing choices if you stick with it. But yeah,
Well, and you guys make it really accessible, and not to give you a plug, but I mean, 30 days for $30, that's pretty much accessible to anybody.
well,
you
and
know.
it is, and it's like Amanda was saying, routine
Yeah.
is huge, and it is huge. I mean, it's the H factor, like human factor. We like routine. We function well when we know what to expect.
Yeah.
Some of us, other people maybe function when they don't know what to expect. But having the opportunity to actually build a routine of a practice, like on this day I'm going to do hot, on this day I'm going to do vinyasa. And not only that, but it allows you to build a balance in your
Mhm.
practice, which I think is something really cool about both of you. I mean, Ken is such a hot practitioner, and you obviously are as well. But we see Ken in PodFit classes, we see Amanda in Vinyasa classes. And I have just, since we opened, started taking the hot classes and taking the fit classes. And I see such a benefit in that balance and that routine, in both mind and body. So yeah, you can plug away, but yeah, 30 days it's good. It helps you establish
Well,
a routine.
and I think coming up with like a realistic goal, right? Because a
Right.
lot of people don't have or are not going to make the time to go to yoga 7 days a week, right? And
Right.
it's just not realistic. And I think there are times I know for myself, I can set myself up for failure easily. I can be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go shoot my bow every day
Mm.
for the month leading up to archery season. And then it's like, that's not going to happen.
No.
I don't have time to do that.
Mhm.
Like, how about twice a week,
Mhm.
and it's 20 minutes. Like, that's so much better than not doing it at all. So, even if it's just somebody going on YouTube and going, like, hey, I'm going to go look at a Rodney Yee
Yeah.
video.
Oh, Rodney.
Good old Rodney. And try some yoga out, or come to a class and see how they do, and maybe go, hey, I've got 30 days, but I'm just gonna go to one a week or two a week
Mhm.
and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I think even that, like, little kind of dipping your toe in is better than never having tried it at all.
What was your first yoga class in a studio experience like?
You know, I definitely even over the course of the last year kind of just like ease myself into the community. Like
Mhm.
I'm not one to go out of my way and introduce myself to everyone. It's more of a gradual, organic kind of relationship being built. I don't remember my first yoga class.
Mm.
I do remember that she sprayed like a yummy essential oil thing, and that was always really nice.
I always find that so odd, like when they're like spritzing everyone.
Spritzing.
She had a
It's
bowl.
nice.
She had a bowl with the what do you call that?
Like a
Singing
singing
bowl.
bowl.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was really nice studio, but it felt really cozy for sure. But
Yeah.
I don't remember what the class was like specifically.
Well, I just ask because I think so many of us have this weird first class experience, or
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
or it's not what you expected.
Well,
or
yeah, you want to talk about that? Got it. I definitely when I
Oh,
when I
zeroed in on
when I
that
first
one.
started, I was like, I look so stupid. I've
Oh,
not
yeah.
done this before. I don't even know any of these positions. It almost, yeah, I guess in a way, like it's wrong and you shouldn't feel this way, but I totally was probably embarrassed.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I know a lot of people that really want to get into it
Sure.
very, very, very badly, but they are held back by the fear of not knowing the poses and not
Mhm.
being able to do it
I'm
efficiently,
not flexible.
or not as
Yeah.
and looking at other people that and comparing yourself to them. And like I can tell you now, from being like more, I would say maybe a seasoned practitioner, like when I'm there, I'm not looking at the people
Yeah.
and what they're
No.
I'm
doing
way
and like
too
what
obsessed
they're
with myself.
yeah.
Like, and looking at myself, making sure
I'm-
everything's in
Oh,
alignment.
Yeah, like-
totally.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah, no, actually that's true. And like today I was almost I wasn't intimidated to come back today, but I was like, wow, this should be interesting. I can't wait to see how I
Mhm.
do,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because it's not about
I
anyone
know.
else.
It is.
Yeah, it really isn't. I mean, that's the amusing part, right? We get all wrapped up in our head and like, oh, what do other people think and whatever, and like, they're just trying to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're just trying to get through.
Right.
It's
really.
called practice for a reason.
It is.
Yeah.
And we've all been there though. We've all been
Oh,
there
yeah.
where we're like so uncomfortable. Everybody's staring at me. And even my husband, since we opened the studio, has started practicing yoga, and he had so many questions before his first studio class, and he said, I don't want to feel like a jerk when I walk into that studio. And he's
Totally.
like looking around, I don't want to have to look around at everybody. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to look around. Like, that's how we all learn. We're all
Sure.
beginners at some point.
Yeah.
And nobody gives a shit. They're not looking
Yeah.
at you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at myself.
Yeah.
And actually, when somebody does come into the studio, I remember a few months ago, this woman came in and it was her first class. She went for it. She did a pod hot class, and I was like,
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah.
And she totally went for it. And afterwards, she was stoked, and she was owning it. And she's like, "Hey, that was she was watching other people. She's like, you're awesome. You're awesome." It's like I was like, "You will be awesome. Like you're awesome just by coming here.
That's
You're
so
you're
great.
amazing just by showing up and owning the fact that you're just getting started. And don't beat yourself up. That's like even just walking into that room. There
Yeah.
have been days where I have maybe had a rough night the night before.
No.
And I'm like, I just got to go, because this is during my time where I was going at least 7 days a week and sometimes doing 2 classes a day.
Oh man.
And I would show up and I'm like, I can't stand right now. But, I would just lay. I would sit some postures out. I would lay in Savasana and just even showing up
Mhm.
on your mat, there's something magical in and of that
Yep.
itself.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I always think when people talk about looking silly or not, like wondering how they're going to do a posture, I always think of standing leg head to knee. Like
Ugh.
because it's so, like, the first time they'd said that, like when I was going to Bikram, I was like, you're kidding me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not, there's no way that this is happening, and it's been 3 years, and there are times where it is very difficult still, and then there are other times where I'm like, oh, I didn't, like, I just got done with that. That just
Totally.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't even think I could, like, grab my foot
Mm-hmm.
when I
Yes.
first started. It was like bending over to
Yep.
grab my foot was not a possibility.
Right.
And so to think about that progression, but it takes, like you said, it's a practice.
Yeah. And sometimes I actually purposely don't do the full expression of a posture, because I think it's because the fundamentals are so important.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so I purposely force myself to not let my ego
Yep.
Mhm.
take myself to the full
Because
expression.
that's how you get hurt.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's
Right.
how, I mean, I remember doing standing leg head to knee and doing it wrong and, like, screwing up
Yeah.
my back so badly,
Mhm.
because and it wasn't necessarily that I didn't have good instruction. It was just that I didn't understand even what I was doing
Right.
wrong. And so I would end up, like, just lifting my leg up. And then, of course, this was when I was at the other studio, and they're like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't bend over because my back, but I want to be here,
Yeah.
and so I think that, to your point, I think that that makes sense,
It does.
at times, for sure.
Oh yeah. We can let our ego.
Definitely.
I mean,
like, hey, look
probably,
at this, man.
Like, I'm so cool. Like,
Yeah.
I teach here. People are probably looking at me.
Yeah.
And probably more often than not, we can let ego kind of take over the practice.
Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous
Mm-hmm.
place
yeah.
to be. The minute you find that that's the reason you're on your mat, or what
Oh, yeah.
takes over maybe
So
when you're on your
not.
mat,
Yeah.
that's the place where it's like, whoa, I need to.
I mean,
need to
I have
step out.
so much to learn. Like, and I
Yeah.
was thinking about this when I was out of town. I was like, because I do marketing and PR, I'm like, I should probably tell these people that I have a podcast, like, that's a yoga podcast, because it'll help spread the word. And then I was like, well, no, then there's going to be expectations on, like, how good I am or not or whatever. And so I didn't do it. I chickened out. But I think it would, like, that sort of thing makes sense,
Mhm.
but it's also very daunting because, but understand, I'm not very good. But I know how to do a podcast and I do a little bit of yoga, maybe like maybe, kind of getting ahead of it like that. I don't
Wow.
Well, you're so brave.
know. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Just starting a podcast and is pretty brave to begin with. I mean, I don't know if there's a few people, but certainly not a Fort Collins based yoga podcast. I don't think.
No, I don't think there is either. And it's so funny because if you had asked me, 3 years ago what I would be doing, probably more than 3, because I've been doing the studio thing for longer than we've been open, obviously. But if somebody had said, like, 5 years ago, where are you going to be? I would have never
Said
ever,
right here.
ever. But it's because of yoga. Like,
Mhm.
yoga helps unlock this creativity. It helps drive you to believe in yourself, to do things that are maybe more uncomfortable, and to not only do them, but find the value in kind of squirming and like getting out of your comfort zone. I would have never been comfortable on camera
Yeah.
or anything like that. And so, yoga, the practice has just given me so much confidence, and also just like, I don't care. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to care. I don't care what people really think of me. I do. I mean,
Totally.
I
That's
want
great.
I want to make
Yeah.
connections, and
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
people to enjoy their interactions with me. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, if somebody doesn't like the podcast, I'm not like,
Yeah.
oh,
You're like, yeah, oh, well.
sad about it.
I actually I love the haters. Because
true.
you've taken yourself
true.
to
Sure.
another level when somebody starts talking shit about you.
Yeah, that's true.
That brings up such an interesting thing, because social media is such a bear, right?
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I'm on it so much because it's my job,
Mm-hmm.
among other jobs. But we were talking about how people are intimidated to walk into a class or studio, and I think social media has done such a disservice to
Yeah.
yoga, but also a service. Like, it's put it out there to now people are interested in it. It's
Sure.
mainstream. It's everybody knows about yoga, but then there's these people doing postures and thongs, and like, it makes it seem not accessible to everybody.
I'm gonna go to one of those classes.
Well, like private Instagram accounts and stuff. I mean, people
Oh,
are like,
right.
they're in their underwear and they're naked and it's all this stuff, and it's like, no judgment, but people see that and then they feel like
They're like, oh,
they
that's
can't
not
look
me.
like that.
That's
or
not
they
attainable
can't-
for them.
Sure.
Yeah. So being on social media all the time is interesting, which is something I actually swore social media off completely 3 years ago. And now I'm, of course, on it daily. And I posted this picture of me going to the Fish concert
Uh-huh.
last Friday. And this guy he married one of my friends, and he made this comment about how when he just made this comment, like, he had this judgment behind it about what Fish fans are like.
Yikes.
And everybody was like, oh, it's so jealous, have fun. And then he made this comment, and I thought, it triggered me at first. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm actually kind of flattered that I've reached that status where the haters, they gotta post stuff. And my
Sure.
husband's like, yeah, they follow you whether they like you or not.
Yeah.
And so you're making an impression. But just a side note, but yeah, the haters, they can help fuel,
Oh, for sure.
make you a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. That's for sure.
No.
I don't.
You should never hate yoga though.
No,
Don't knock it till you try it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
for sure.
That's the whole point. Did we have any good comments over there?
Just the usual.
First rule
My
of the
lease is just like out of control. Thanks, my lease. She's
I
see,
love it.
Cat Williams says the more haters the better. Wow, Cat
Yeah,
Williams.
Who's Cat Williams?
I don't know that he
Okay.
is somebody that you want to emulate.
Yeah, the
Um,
more haters, the better, because then people, they notice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're-
Oh, they notice Cat
they
Williams
notice,
for sure.
yeah.
He's a
Oh.
yeah.
Mm,
He's
yeah.
he's a piece of work. But we are, we've got a couple. We can go through a couple comments here. So mostly hi, love the humans. Just do it, guys. No time like the present. So Logan, I don't. Do you know Logan?
Well,
Katie from the
Katie.
studio.
Ah, okay.
It's a
I'm, like,
couples
so-
account.
I'm
They're
so
really
confused.
it's
Yeah.
hardcore couples account.
Mac on. Megan Anderson.
Megan.
Yeah. My lease.
Oh,
My lease.
She's
Mac
here in
Julia.
spirit. Cool.
Yeah. So a bunch of
Bunch of members.
bunch of
staff.
members.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So Debbie. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We are a little bit over an hour.
so hard
Um,
to put a time on it.
I know it
you
is.
know?
I know.
I'd just grab coffee and stay here all day.
I know,
Well,
but
you-
everybody has a life,
Yeah.
you know. So it's kind of I kind of try to keep it to
Yeah,
a little
totally.
less than an hour and 15 if we can. But I really appreciate the conversation. For me, what this does is it kind of reinforces how much yoga means to me, and just sitting here and talking because I, contrarily to you, don't actually talk about yoga a whole lot, except to my wife.
Yeah.
And my kids are totally sick of hearing about it.
This is so validating.
So no, but it's great, you know, to have
Yeah.
to talk to like-minded people. We should get somebody in here who hates yoga.
Well, I was actually going to mention that. I don't think maybe not necessarily somebody who hates it, but somebody who is completely indifferent that would just like be like maybe give it a shot one
Mhm.
day
That's an
and maybe do like a
interesting-
before and after kind of thing. And
Ooh, I like
That's a
that.
I
great
you should, I
idea.
think I would love.
Like
I
give
think
away a
I think
membership. It could be a
Yes.
giveaway membership.
If there's
like,
anybody out there,
contest
I
right
would.
there.
I want it to be my husband, but I don't. He
Ooh.
would
But
kill
he
me.
probably doesn't want to do it.
Kill me for saying that.
Such a good idea,
great.
though. A
Yeah.
before and
Yeah.
after. Give them a month to practice, and then have
Yeah.
them back on.
Yeah,
I
Good-
love it.
that'd be neat.
You're tracking somebody's journey and having
Yeah.
having them
Ooh,
journal
I
about
like
it.
it. Ooh, yeah.
That's
It'd be
awesome.
really
I like it.
fun.
I like it.
That's great.
Excellent.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
Good
all right.
job.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, and thanks
Yeah.
everyone for tuning in. If you have the chance, please go down there. It's over there. Yeah, and share, like, and that would be that would be really helpful. We're just doing this for fun. So any sort of support that you can give us would be great.
Yeah, and if you have any questions for me after the fact, feel free to just comment in the comments and I'll answer them as they come.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And check out Amanda's bands, Colony Funk and Honey Riders.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Michael Kirkpatrick and the Honey Rider Band
Okay.
will be playing at Halloween.
Ooh,
Oh,
fun.
Nice.
Awesome.
Actually, my next gig, my last early gig of the summer, will be Sunday at Open Streets
Mm,
at 3 p.m.
perfect.
at Blevins Park.
oh,
and
that's
so it's-
perfect.
Actually, it might be 2. It's around that time, and that's early. It's super family friendly, and there's really no excuse not to go. But if you haven't been to Open Streets yet, they block off the streets and
Mhm.
you just ride your bikes along, and there's food trucks and music and yoga and,
Mhm.
and all sorts of stuff. So it's really fun.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
The awkward end.